everyone, it's Gina from orchidandopal.com, and I'm back today with a tutorial for these simple and elegant memory wire beaded bracelets. They are cuff style, and man, there's so many possibilities with these. So the frame of these is actually made of memory wire, but as you can see, they are not closed up and they fit great around the wrist without slipping off if you use beads that are on the smaller size, like the ones shown. And this particular technique combines right angle weave bead weaving, which is really simple. I have a video on that if you're not sure what that is, which I will try to link right in the corner, and a little bit of stringing. Here's a look at this bracelet on. I will leave links to everything right down below the video, as well as a full materials list, but the basic rundown is you're gonna need 2 pieces of memory wire that are just slightly larger than your wrist. You'll need some 6mm and some 4mm beads. I'm using the 4x6 rondelles and then 4mm crystal bicones, and then some 24 or 26 gauge wire. Now those are the main things besides your tools. If you'd like to finish these up like I did, you can use these handy memory wire end caps and glue them on, and they actually are staying in place really well. And I think it gives these a nice professional finished off look instead of just doing a loop with your memory wire. But that's totally up to you. Of course, our tools, if you have memory wire cutters, those will be ideal. I'm just using my old wire cutter so I don't mess up my other ones. It would be helpful to have a pair of round nose pliers and then also a pair of chain nose. And for our actual right angle weave bead weaving, I'll be using a size 10 beading needle and some 6-pound Fireline. For the first step of this project, we can get rid of everything else that we have here and just focus on our beads and our needle and thread. We'll start there. All right, so with your needle and thread, string on one of your rondelles, a bicone, a rondelle, and a bicone. So you have 4 beads on your needle, and if you're not using those particular shapes, you can use rounds too, like I have here, just some 6mm and some 4mm rounds, but alternate those and pull them down toward your tail thread, leaving yourself at least a 4 to 6 inch tail that you can weave back in later. And like we do with right angle weave, we're gonna take our needle and we're gonna go back through all 4 of those beads, starting to form these into a loop, but we have to go through one more as well. So go through your next one, which is my rondelle, and pull. So here we have our first unit of right angle weave, and we're just gonna be building onto this, creating the length that we want for our bracelet. Because we're gonna be stringing this onto the memory wire and I want this to be really, really sturdy, what I'd like for you to do is go around these units at least twice. So I'm going around this unit of 4 again, just to add even more strength to our piece. And if you are using a heavier thickness of Fireline, that would work too. I just happen to have the 6-pound and that's what I'm going with today, and we'll just double it up. So let's add on another unit. To do that, we need to pick up a bicone, a rondelle, and a bicone. Swing our needle down through the rondelle that our thread is currently coming out of, and it pops those into place. Now we're gonna head over to the right through the bicone, up through the rondelle, and pull your thread tightly each time you pass through a bead, and also just go through one bead at a time. And then go back down the rondelle where we started that unit, pull, and go through each of those beads again, one more time. All right, and now we want to head over to the right through the bicone at the bottom and up through the rondelle at the very end in order to pick up another unit. So let's do one more together. Bicone, rondelle, bicone, swinging around, going this time up through the rondelle at the end, pulling, heading over through the bicone on the right, down through the rondelle, through the bicone, up through the rondelle, pulling everything tight, and then repeating through that thread path once more. To strengthen this really well. So continue with your right angle weave until you have the length of beading that you would like for your cuff bracelet. I will leave the amount of beads that I'm using right down below the video, and you can see that when you put this cuff bracelet on, the two ends do not quite meet on my wrist. I have a good at least inch of play, and then it falls away just a little bit. And I usually prefer about a 7-inch bracelet just to help you gauge how long you'd like yours to be. So don't make your beading quite meet around your wrist, leave yourself at least about an inch. Once you have beaded your length of right angle weave, we'll meet back and complete the next step. All right guys, welcome back. So I have my length of beading, it's about 6 inches long, and I'm at the point where I want to just tie off this thread. And so what I'm gonna do is make a half hitch knot right there in the corner where I'm coming out, pull that, go through this bead on the end. I'm gonna make a knot right here. And I'm gonna do this several times just to make sure that our beading stays in place. Going through there. And you can really do this as much as you'd like or weave back through your piece depending on how much extra thread you have at the end of your beading. It's not going to hurt at all. So I'm gonna stop right here after I go through a couple of beads. And right there, just trim off that excess thread. And now we're ready to string this on our memory wire. So I have 2 segments. And as you can see, they're a little bit less than maybe 1.5 loops. And these are going to form the frame of our bracelet. So with one of the segments of memory wire, you want to pick up your beading and begin gently feeding the memory wire through those 4mm beads on the side. Take your time doing this. There is no rush. It may get a little bit more challenging in the center for you. It just depends. And if you have to, you can just back the memory wire out a little bit and readjust and go back in. And something else I find that works is scrunching. So I scrunch the beads forward and then back, and then just keep feeding that memory wire through. And this is going through really well, which is great. It's also going to depend on the holes of your beads. You want to make sure you're using beads with at least a 1mm diameter hole, which is pretty standard. So we have one side completely on the memory wire, and we need to feed through our other side. So you'll take your other piece of memory wire and begin feeding that one through the bicones or the beads that are on the opposite side. Try to also not bend your memory wire too much in any direction that it doesn't naturally go. That way you don't cause any additional kinks or bends in that memory wire. You want it to keep that shape so that it makes a really nicely fitting beaded cuff. You might fight just a little bit more to get the second piece through, but just one bead at a time and you will get there. Almost there. Gotta back this up just a little bit. All right, so I just left some of this memory wire free on each side, which is going to come in handy, and it will give us more to hang on to while we're doing a little bit of wire wrapping. So position your beading in the center of the memory wire and make sure you spread it out so that it is fully lengthened and not all scrunched up really tight. Just give it room, spread it out just like that. And now we want to grab our 24 or 26 gauge wire. I'm going to recommend about 4 to 5 feet of this. So find about the midway point of your wire and also find about the midway point of your beading. We're going to start in the middle as opposed to off to one side. And you're gonna start by crossing your wire over gently in a diagonal manner from one bicone down to the other bicone, and just kind of gently wrap that and hold that end of your wire in place. And I'm gonna work with my right side first. So I'm going to wrap that underneath, pulling that wire, and repeat that process, tightly wrapping the wire around in a diagonal manner from bicone to bicone, from one side down to the other, and as neat as possible, just pulling that wire taut and wrapping it around. And also, again, make sure your beads are not all bunched together. You can actually spread them out as far as they will go within reason, and just keep wrapping that around. Try to keep a very firm tension on this and take your time. And make sure the other ends of your memory wire aren't slipping up into any beads or behind your wire as you get towards each side. All right, so there is the last wrap for this side, and then I'm gonna come back around like so, and I'm going to make more wraps in the opposite direction. So this time we're going from bicone to bicone around the rondelle from top right to bottom left, just the opposite of what you did before. And just gently but firmly wrapping these one section at a time. And you can see this very nice looking X pattern that wire creates. And it also makes our bracelet feel much more sturdy once we start doing this. The reason I started in the center is because I wanted to work with half the amount of thread. If we started on one side, we'd be working with that entire length of about 5 feet of wire, and it's just harder to manage the more that you're working with. All right, so I'm at the point where the wires are now meeting again, and I'm just going to pick up with this one on the left that we had started with and continue wrapping in that direction, just wrapping that in one way. And I'm just spreading these beads out in the memory wire with my fingers like that to make it a little bit easier to wrap. Okay, so there's that side done. Now let's pick back up with this wire on the other side. It's a little bit easier for me to work from left to right, so I'm just turning this bracelet, and I'm going to continue with my wraps to complete the X's on this other side, working towards the end. All right, so here is the end of this bracelet. This one's nice and clean because of the way we wrapped it, so we don't have to worry about finishing that off with any wire. But on this side, of course, we have these two ends of wire to worry about. I have these ends crisscrossed right underneath, and I'm just going to tuck in the left-hand side right through the rondelle. Just feed that through. Just like you would a piece of thread. And then with the piece hanging out on the right-hand side, I'm going to feed that in the rondelle as well, just going through the opposite side. And while you pull, just make sure your wire is staying as smooth as possible, and you'll just pull that end in. And now that side is secure, we just want to finish it off a tiny bit more. So I'm taking this end that came out of the right-hand side of the rondelle. I'm going to tuck that in between the memory wire, and I'm going to loop this around the memory wire about 3 times, just so it stays in place like that. And then I'm going to clip that off with my wire cutters and tuck it in, and you can scrunch that little loop there so it's neat. And now we'll repeat on this end. We have our other side coming out of the rondelle, and we're going to wrap this around the left-hand piece of memory wire approximately 3 times to match the other side. And there we go. I'm just giving it a little scrunch and a little snip, and just use your pliers to make sure that the ends are not poking out in any way. And your bracelet is just about complete. All that's left to do is finish up the ends, and this is where you have some options. Now I have some of these memory wire Beaded end caps. This is a variety pack with some different decorative ones. You're welcome to pick up something like that. They also come in a gold tone if you're using gold memory wire, and that's going to take a little bit of time to dry. You want to let those end caps dry for approximately 24 hours or at least overnight. So if you are going with the end cap method, what you'll do is you will clip off your memory wire on the side, leaving definitely no more than 1/4 inch. But make sure those little nubs that you leave are even. Then you'll take a little bit of jewelry glue, like some GS Hypo Cement, some E6000, or this product which I just picked up, and I'm gonna give this a try because it's got this nice precision tip needle on the end, and it's not supposed to dry out as quickly in the tube. So you would just dab a little bit of glue on these ends, pop on these end caps, which are just like little beads that are only drilled through 1/2, and let this sit undisturbed. And you can see I would actually cut off even more of that wire to bring those ends down closer to that bead. Now, if you don't want to use end caps, another way you can finish this off is by just simply looping your memory wire back on itself, and that will hold these coils of wire into place. To do that, you will also leave yourself a little nub on each side. I'm going to leave some extra because I'm going to be gluing on some end caps, and this is just for example. And what you can do is take your round nose pliers and use your imagination that this wire is shorter and it would be coming to about here, and then you would wrap the memory wire back on itself, forming a loop just like that on either side. And you're welcome to do that as well. So there are a couple of options for you, and that will complete your cuff bracelet. So I want to thank you guys so much for being with me for this tutorial. I hope it was fun and helpful for you, and also easy for you to follow. Please feel free to leave me a comment down below. I always love to hear from you. Don't forget to check below the video for links to products I recommend and am using today, as well as the full materials list. And if you enjoyed this video, I'd love for you to give it a big thumbs up, and also hit that subscribe button so you'll be notified of when I'm posting new content, because I'd love to have you back. You can also follow my social media handles, which are linked down below, and check out my website and blog at orchidandopal.com. Until next time, I hope you have a fabulous rest of your day, and as always, happy beading.